Hello guys, this is Doran's Movies and welcome to the 5th episode of the big Q&A. This episode is going to be a bit less of a Q&A. I know it's called a Q&A, but this is going to be more of a discussion about the Warcraft movie because a lot of people have asked me about the Warcraft movie through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube messages, comments. So I thought I would do a video since I'm not really gonna do a full-on review, but I will try to answer a few questions here and there about the lore. So something to keep in mind is that you're watching this video about 5 to 6 days after I have recorded this, so I have seen the movie before this point, but it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it's still my opinion on the movie. I have watched it only a day before recording this, so today is like the 10th, it's 9th of June. So before I get into my thoughts on the movie, I just want to cover a few things and then I'll do like a discussion on the movie. So first thing about the channel is that I started the new city lore series and so far it's doing actually pretty well. A lot of people suggest I should do this city or that city, but I will cover all of them, like the most important ones. I most likely will not cover like the smaller ones, like the bases in different zones, but I will cover all of the major ones like Stormwind, Undercity, Gilneas, and all the different big towns. Also, another thing is that this month is going to be a bit slower than usual. On the regular schedule, I don't really have a set schedule, but on the regular one, I usually try to get videos out every 4 to 5 days, kinda depending on the length. But this month has been a bit slower, mainly because I have like some schoolwork I need to finish up. But once I'm done with that in like a few days, a few weeks, I will be able to get to the regular schedule. So probably at the point you're watching this, I have already finished this and it's kinda over. So yeah, let's not waste too much time. I have a lot to talk about the movie and I just want to get as much as I can. So this is a really big topic and something I could talk about for a really long time, but I'll just try to cover the most important points and give you my first impressions on the movie. So I'm personally not really a fan of these number ratings because these number ratings they're so vague and it's always subjective. Like people give 10s out of 10s to like movies that are really bad, or like if they dislike something about the movie they just give it like 1 out of 10 even though the movie is probably like 6 out of 10. So that is why I don't really like the ratings, but personally I would give it 7.5 out of 10, like probably not 8 out of 10, but like 7.5 to 8 out of 10. For some reference to my own subjective opinion, like Lord of the Rings or the original Star Wars would be 10 out of 10 on my list, and The Hobbit would be like 6.57. I know a lot of people hate The Hobbit, but I actually liked it. It wasn't really that bad of a movie. It wasn't the best movie, but it wasn't that bad. So I digress, let's not get too crazy into other topics, let's cover the Warcraft movie. Now, personally, I feel like the movie was pretty solid. The only thing is, to me, it kind of felt like I was watching Game of Thrones, like it felt like I was watching an episode of a series, which is why I think it would be so awesome if we had like the Warcraft Game of Thrones, something in that manner where you could have like seasons and like 10 episodes in every 2 years or something like that. I think it would definitely be better because the Warcraft story is so insanely big and I don't really think you can really cover it in 1 or 2 or even like 10-15 movies because there's so many different aspects of the story that you can talk about. Now for the movie, the visuals were really good and the CGI, the animations. Some people complain about acting for some reason. I really don't see why they would do that. Like the acting was really good in my opinion, especially with Ragnar. Like he's one of my favorite actors, like Travis Fimmel. If you guys still watch the Vikings, you would probably know him, but he is a pretty cool actor and pretty unique. I really don't see like why people complain. Like some people see the discussions, like the dialogue between the CGI and the humans was kind of weird, but I didn't really notice any difference. So something that has bothered me a bit is that I don't really feel like they explored the sets as much as they could have. I mean, they built a Goldshire, Karazhan, this part of Stormwind, but like in 3D they built the entire Stormwind and then they did like a physical set of only like a few streets, but I really feel like they didn't use the sets as much as they could. I mean, in Goldshire they were only there for like a few minutes, even in Stormwind, like they built all this stuff and only spent a few minutes there, which might actually be a hint that they might do sequels, like that they actively plan to do sequels. Like, you wouldn't build all these things, all these sets, all this like amazing equipment just to record like one film. I think they're planning at least like 1 or 2 more movies, but all in all, the visual quality and the CGI was really good, but the story, as I kinda expected, was very much different. Obviously, I'm aware it is alternate universe, I even made a video on it, and I know that the story is changed, but if you look at a movie, main points are still pretty much the same. So the destination where everything happened, like where they're supposed to reach, is pretty much the same. Like the destination is the same, but the way things happen and the way things reach the destination is very much different from the main universe. Like, some events are drastically different than they are in the movie, but pretty much they get to the same place one way or the other. Now, one thing that kinda disappointed me, and this is actually a pretty big spoiler, so if you haven't seen the movie, just like skip a bit, like a minute, I'll just talk a bit about it. Now, the thing that disappointed me was the involvement of Durotan, which was kind of not what I expected. I mean, if you read the Durotan novel, the entire book was dedicated to his story. I mean, it is called the Durotan novel, which is a prequel to the movie, and I thought his role was going to be much more significant and that he was going to reach the other sequels of the movie and survive, as opposed to him being assassinated in the main universe. I thought he was actually gonna survive in this universe, but the entire thing kinda happened with Raka and Durotan, and in my opinion, like, this way of them dying was a lot sadder than it was in the actual movie. I mean, the assassination was pretty bad, but that Vakura was pretty heartbreaking if you read the Durotan novel. But for someone that is probably not familiar, like, they don't really care that much, I guess, but if you're familiar with his character, it was kinda sad. But all in all, as things were different, they weren't really that different. As I mentioned earlier, like, the main scale, like the large scale, was kind of the same, just like the things that happened in between the point A and B were just drastically different. Now, another thing I want to talk about, and that is probably the most important thing about this channel, like the stuff I cover, and that is the lore differences. For example, the Fel is very much different than it actually is in the game. In the game, it is this magic that is drawn from the Twisted Nether, and the demons use it. It is kind of like a mix between the arcane and the void in a way, but here it is kind of different, and it is weirdly enough similar to nature magic, just like completely opposite. Like, in nature, if you don't understand that, when you heal, you transfer the life essence of nature into that person, the tree, the creature you're trying to heal. But with Fel, you drain the life essence from a creature by force, or like a tree, or just the essence of nature from the nature, and use it to power yourself, others, empower others, like they did Black Hand, and open portals and all of that stuff. So in my opinion, it seems a bit too OP if you ask me, because no orc can challenge Gul'dan, as he can just like drain their power and become even stronger, like as we have seen with a few different orcs. I won't really spoil that much. This isn't really a spoiler-free review. I will write that in the description, but hopefully if you skip that Durotan part I covered, like, hopefully I didn't really spoil the story that much for you. Now, another thing is the critics. As most of you already know, like if you have been reading about the Warcraft movie, is that the movie has gotten awful review scores. They weren't really like super bad, but on sites like the Rotten Tomatoes, they were like 30% out of 100, which is really bad, which I personally thought was completely undeserved. I can very much understand that some people that don't really know about the lore, they can be really confused with the movie, because when you watch the movie, you have all these new characters introduced, and it's a really dynamic movie, which is a great thing for the fans, because we already know about these characters, but for someone that has seen the movie for the first time, I can see how it can be a bit confusing. Like, even at the start, they introduce all these characters that people have never even seen, and they don't really give them a proper introduction, if you could say that. They just kind of give them a brief introduction, but it's like, here you go, like, you have all these characters, now you just kind of have to untangle them. So I don't really think it is that bad of a thing. It is really good for the fans, but you can't really choose. Like, you either gotta do a movie for the fans or like for a really broad audience. They kinda compromised, I guess. They didn't really go full like just for the fans. They kinda, as with the alternate universe, they did expand the lore a bit, they changed a lot of stuff, but they didn't really just like completely abolish it and just like use the themes but completely change the story. So it is kind of a mix between the broad audience and the fan audience, which is why I can understand a lot of critics that aren't familiar with the lore of the game. I can see why they would be kind of against the movie. So to finish it up, I would say I really like the movie. I definitely think there will be a sequel. The way they told the story, like, to me it seemed like an episode of a series. It didn't even really seem like a movie on its own. So I think they will definitely do a sequel, and since the movie has already made quite some money, I think they made almost 100 million just in China alone, like 75 million in Europe, and I believe about 30 million in US, and their budget was 160 million, so they have already broke even, and they're definitely gonna make more money. I mean, they're gonna have the director's cut, they're still gonna air it in cinemas for the next few months or even a year. They have all this merchandise they're selling, so they're definitely gonna make some money. The movie is definitely not a failure, which is a really good thing. But personally, I mean, I really like the movie, but I would really like to see like a series like Game of Thrones. Obviously that would be a bit hard to do. You can't really make like 10 to 12 episodes because of all the CGI. That's like a lot of work, but they could do like 5-6 episodes like every year or two, which would be kind of better than the movie, because as I mentioned earlier, the Warcraft universe is just like so big. Like, if you have been following my channel, I've been doing this thing for like 5 years and I've only scratched the surface. Like, there's so much lore I still have to cover, so you can see how hard that is to kind of cover in a 2-hour movie, and I would really like to see like a series, which I think could be possible at some point. But for now, I think we're gonna have like a trilogy, a Warcraft trilogy, which I think can be really good. And as this movie was, I don't really wanna spoil too much again, but this movie was kinda like before the first war started. It didn't really go into the first war, so it kinda set everything up, so it seems like everything is going to happen in the second movie or the third movie, which I think is going to be a great thing, and I really wanna see like a continuation of these movies. Alright, so that is it for the discussion. Let's get into a few lore questions I have. I don't really have too much time to finish this up, as I have a lot of schoolwork to finish up, but do leave your questions. I will do another Q&A. I usually do these every month or two, but I'm gonna do like another one in like 2 or 3 weeks, where I'm just gonna focus on the lore questions. So if you have any good lore questions, feel free to leave them under this video. There's gonna be a high probability that I'm gonna take your question. So let's not waste any more time, let's get into the lore. The first question is by G Chaz, and he asks, do paladins and priests worship the same powers, the holy light? When you're a paladin and talk to a priest trainer, the trainer will tell you not to turn your back on the light. Now, I've talked about this many times in the past. I think I might have even answered a similar question. I know I talked about it in the RP guide, but the paladins and the priests are very much the same thing. I mean, they worship the same light, they're not the same class. The main difference is that the paladins are kind of a mix between a warrior and a priest, and they use the powers of the light in a bit of a different way, sort of in an offensive way, to help them in melee combat and heal themselves. Like, they can create shields and attack enemies with the light, while the priests take a more of a distance approach, but they're still very much the same. I mean, priests can obviously be offensive, like they can attack, and they can still be effective warriors, or I guess casters. Now, another thing is that priests, in a more traditional sense, I'm not really talking about the shadow ones or our characters, but more referring to the human priests or even the Dene priests, they have a pretty significant role in the civilian society within the civilians, because they are running churches, spreading the word of the light, helping other people, while the paladins are mostly a warrior order, so their role is to protect the people in times of war and protect the world itself. While the priests can do that, but they also have a lot more tasks when there is peace and there isn't an immediate threat to their society. Alright, the next question is by Drayan, and he asks, could an undead Forsaken become a druid? There are undead druid ghosts around the world, but no actual Forsaken that works towards becoming a druid. Alright, this is a bit of a tricky question, but I can almost certainly say no, because the main reason is due to them being abominations. Of course, like, we can play as undeads and talk to them and work with them. They seem like members like of the society, but they're just not natural creatures. For example, Sylvanas learned that no matter what she does, hell awaits her after she dies for being an undead, which is why she values her life so much, because usually an undead wouldn't really care about his life because he's kinda cursed. And Sylvanas didn't care about her life for a really long time until she learned that she will be going to eternal hell after she dies. So when it comes to being a druid, it is really important to respect the nature and be able to communicate with the nature. And the druids and their practice are very much similar to the shamans, but instead of working with the elementals, they work with nature around them, they communicate with nature and ask for favors of the nature. And if you notice, like with undead, with their bases, wherever the undead go, there is no life. The blight spreads are on the ground. Like if you just look at Undercity or all of their settlements, and as it is pretty evident, the nature doesn't really favor them, and they are kind of abominations. I mean, some people might be offended by this because if they play an undead, but that is the truth in the lore, because they're not natural creatures, and kinda nature, natural, it's kinda related. So I'm almost completely certain that undeads will never really be druids, but there could always be some change. I mean, you never really know with Blizzard, like they're probably gonna add something at some point, but I don't actually really see a point of them adding undead druids, and it would probably even complicate things in the gameplay with different race class combinations. Alright, so the next question is by Versus, and he asks, if Archimonde uses spell powers, why is he blue and not red? I mean, there is a whole Feldrena race who are red, so why/how did Archimonde keep his color? Alright, so this is an interesting question. We have seen a lot of red Eredar, known as the Manari, because the Eredar were once a race. The ones that escaped were the Draenei, and the ones that were corrupted were the Manari. But actually, not all of the corrupted Eredar are red, like some are, but not all of them. In Warcraft 3, we have seen the various Eredars, and they have been in various different colors, some even purple. And for example, the Vradguards, which not many people actually know, they were once Eredar. You can see many of them in the Hellfire Peninsula and in many other places in Outland, and even with the New Burning Legion invasion. But the Vradguards have a purple, bluish skin tone, so they're definitely not red. And also, if you look at the Warcraft cinematic and even in the Warcraft 3 game, Archimonde has more of a greenish skin as opposed to a blue one that he has in WoW. So from what we have seen so far in the history, we have seen green, blue, red, and purple. So those are kind of the skin tones of the corrupted Eredar, but they could probably even have a mix between those colors, like a green, bluish, like red, purplish. We have seen like the various different variations, but the green, blue, red, and purple are kind of like the main colors. Alright, and that is all I have for this video. Do leave your questions for the next video. As I said, I will do it within the next few weeks. I didn't really have enough time to answer a lot of questions in this video, mainly because I have a lot of work to do outside of just YouTube. But feel free to leave your questions. You can leave them in the comment section below or send them by Facebook and Twitter, and I will try to do my best to answer them in the next Q&A. Thanks a lot for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're not subscribed to the channel already, as it really helps out and keeps all the videos going. And thanks a lot for taking the time out of the day to watch this video, and see you next time.